I never thought a single text could make my hands tremble. Not now, not after everything I've built. I'm standing by my office window, the city lights stretching below like a river of gold and silver, the hum of traffic a soft backdrop to the quiet panic rising in my chest. My silk blouse feels impossibly tight around my shoulders, like it knows the weight I'm carrying, and the cold ceramic of my coffee mug presses against my palm, grounding me or trying to. The phone vibrates again, impatient, insistent. His mother's name flashes on the screen. I freeze. Of course, she'd show up. Of course, she wouldn't just let things be. Not after she heard whispers about my modest little business, the one I never mentioned. She expects to find me the same girl she always underestimated. Polite, compliant, harmless. But I'm not that girl anymore. Not by a long shot. Every decision I made, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, it all led to this, and I can't let anyone erase it. Not her. Not him. I glance around my office, letting my eyes settle on the little victories tucked into corners. The framed awards, the abstract painting I splurged on, the mahogany desk that holds more than just papers. It holds the story of the woman I became when the world told me I couldn't. My chest tightens, a mix of pride and apprehension, and I tap the phone with a shaky finger. All right, I whisper to myself, voice steadier than I feel. Let's see how shocked they can get. 3 years ago, I was sitting in the same apartment, only it felt smaller, dimmer, like it was shrinking around me every time my father's words cut through the air. You're dreaming too big, Emily, he said, shaking his head as if disappointment were an art form. No one's going to take you seriously. You'll fail. My hands shook as I clutched the chipped mug my grandmother had given me, a tiny, imperfect thing she swore held more luck than gold. It smelled faintly of coffee and lavender, her favorite scent, and for a moment, I closed my eyes and let it calm me. She had always believed in me, even when my own family didn't. You have fire, Emily, she whispered once. Don't let them snuff it out. Not for anyone. But standing there, facing his condescending gaze and my mother's silent sighs, I felt small, invisible, dismissed. The lump in my throat made it hard to breathe, my chest tight with frustration and sorrow. I wanted to scream, to prove them all wrong, but I didn't even have the words, only that burning certainty that I couldn't stay. I remember packing that night like I was sneaking out of someone else's life. My grandmother had given me a small, leather-bound notebook before I left, insisting I write every idea, every plan, every tiny victory. This will be your compass, she said, pressing it into my palm with a firmness that left no room for argument. Trust it. Trust yourself. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The city streets swallowed me whole, neon lights blurring with tears I refused to shed in public. For the first time, I was alone, truly alone, with nothing but a notebook, a backpack, and the fragile, stubborn spark of ambition my grandmother had lit inside me. That night, I made a promise. I would build something that no one could ever dismiss again. I would create a life that didn't need validation, didn't need permission, and certainly didn't need approval. And I would do it quietly, without fanfare, without telling a soul, especially the people who doubted me the most. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. And it was the first step toward the life I would one day hide from them, the life they never imagined I could have. The first few months were brutal. I rented a tiny studio in the outskirts of the city, where the walls were thin enough to hear my neighbors argue about everything from rent to relationships, but at least it was mine. I worked day and night, fueled by instant coffee and stubborn determination, scribbling ideas into the leather-bound notebook my grandmother had given me. Every rejected pitch, every client who turned me down, felt like a personal test. Some days, I thought I'd never make it. Then I met Karen. She was a seasoned entrepreneur, sharp, exacting, but with a soft spot for anyone who refused to quit. Emily, you have talent, she said on our first meeting, her eyes scanning the messy notebook I had carried everywhere. But talent without strategy is just wasted energy. Let me teach you the ropes. She became my mentor, guiding me through contracts, marketing, client negotiations, even the subtle art of commanding respect in rooms full of men who assumed I didn't belong. The learning curve was steep. I made mistakes, plenty of them. I lost clients I shouldn't have, sent emails with typos that felt like personal failures, and stayed up nights wondering if I had made the wrong choice leaving my family behind. But slowly, incrementally, things began to shift. My first big client came unexpectedly, a small startup looking for someone to revamp their branding. I pour myself into that project, every idea carefully considered, every detail polished. When they signed a contract, I felt an unfamiliar warmth, validation. But it was private, quiet, a secret victory no one could take away. Then came the first profitable sale, the first hire, the first time I realized my business had legs. I started growing steadily, slowly expanding, keeping my accounts meticulously separate from anything my family could trace. I posted modest updates online, never hinting at the full scope of my success. To the world, and especially to them, I was still just Emily. Polite, ambitious, but not extraordinary. Every milestone, I noted in that leather notebook, sometimes writing at 2 a.m., the city lights casting shadows across the floor. It became more than a record. It became a ritual, a talisman. I realized the value of building quietly, of letting results speak for themselves. And all the while, I imagined the day they would finally see me fully realized, in control, unstoppable, not because I wanted revenge, but because I deserved acknowledgement. I learned to savor small wins privately. The first glowing client testimonial, the first large contract signed without a mentor's hand guiding me, the subtle thrill of negotiating my worth without flinching. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was mine. Every decision, every late night, every risk taken had led me here, to a life where I didn't need approval, where I held the power, quietly, patiently, like a secret weapon. I knew they would arrive expecting the timid, unsure Emily they had always known. The Emily who would blush, apologize too much, and nod when told she couldn't achieve something. I let them think that, let the anticipation build, while I prepared for the moment they would finally see me as I truly was. When the doorbell rang, I smoothed the silk blouse I had chosen that morning, feeling the cool fabric against my skin, and inhaled deeply. The scent of fresh flowers on my desk mingled with the faint aroma of roasted coffee beans, grounding me in the elegance of the life I had painstakingly built. The space behind me was a reflection of my journey. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with books I had studied endlessly, abstract paintings I had invested in, and a mahogany desk that bore the weight of contracts, plans, and dreams fulfilled. Everything spoke of control, sophistication, and success. They stepped in cautiously, their eyes immediately scanning the room, the subtle gleam of gold accents on the shelves, the way sunlight reflected off the glass awards, the polished floor that no one could mistake for a temporary setup. I noticed the hesitation in their steps, the slight widening of eyes, the pause that signaled their disbelief. "Emily," his mother began, her voice sharp but uncertain. I raised a hand, letting her words die in the air. "Please," I said, my voice calm, steady, yet carrying the weight of every struggle, every sleepless night, every dismissal I had endured. "Look around before you speak." They did. And I let them take it all in. The office space I had designed myself, the framed contracts from multinational clients, the awards that marked every milestone, every risk that had paid off. Their expressions shifted from polite expectation to shock, disbelief, and then to something closer to awe. "I'm guessing this isn't the small, struggling business you imagined I'd have," I said, letting the words roll slowly, deliberately, savoring the pause as they processed them. "This," I gestured to the desk, the certificates, the artwork, "is mine. Every piece, every deal, every client. I own it. And yes, the $15 million net worth, I've been hiding it for a reason." The silence was palpable. His father looked like he had swallowed a lemon. His mother's hand trembled as she reached instinctively for a pen, as though notarizing my life would somehow change the reality of what she was witnessing. They hadn't just underestimated me, they had dismissed the possibility entirely. I let the moment linger, watching their disbelief turn to shame, a subtle guilt creeping into their features. Then I leaned forward slightly, my eyes steady. I did what I had to do to survive, to grow, to prove to myself that I could thrive without anyone else's approval. And now I don't need anyone to validate me. The weight of years of secrecy, effort, and quiet ambition filled the room. I had planned this confrontation meticulously, not out of malice, but because the truth deserved to be seen, fully, unfiltered. They had assumed I was the same girl from 3 years ago, but I was not. And in that moment, I finally saw the truth reflected in their eyes: astonishment, respect, and a dawning recognition that the Emily they thought they knew had always been underestimated, and that underestimation had been their mistake. For the first time in years, I felt the balance of power shift entirely. The room that once felt suffocating under their judgment now echoed with my authority. I could see it in their hesitant glances, in the subtle stiffening of their posture. They had come expecting a struggling girl, and instead found a woman who had rewritten her entire life on her own terms. I let them settle in the silence, letting the weight of my success sink in. Then I spoke, each word measured, deliberate. I can help you, but on my terms. Not because I owe you anything, but because I choose to. His mother's lips parted, ready to protest, but I raised a hand. No interruptions. Listen first. I laid out the conditions. Accountability. You cannot walk away from the consequences of your actions, I said firmly. No more dismissing, belittling, or undermining me or anyone else. You must take responsibility for the way you treat people. Growth. If you want a place in my life moving forward, pursue something meaningful. Find your purpose beyond criticism. Stop trying to control my story. It's my own. Respect. This applies to everyone, including family, employees, friends. Respect is not optional. You earn it, and you will show it consistently. I watched them process my words. Shock softened into hesitation, and hesitation slowly morphed into acceptance. They realized that any further attempts to manipulate, to guilt, to control, would not work. I had created boundaries that were clear, immovable, and necessary, not out of spite, but for emotional survival and growth. Then I added the final condition, softer but no less firm. I care about you, some of you more than I can admit, but care alone doesn't undo the past. Actions do. Show me you can change, and we can rebuild relationships grounded in respect, understanding, and honesty. There was a pause. Then a tentative nod from my father, a shaky exhale from his mother. It wasn't perfect. They weren't fully transformed in that moment. But the lines were drawn, and for the first time, I was the one drawing them. I felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of control that I had never had as a younger woman in their shadow. I could feel the power, not in wealth or office space, but in clarity, clarity of self, clarity of boundaries, clarity of vision. I wasn't punishing them. I was setting them free from old patterns. And myself too. It was a delicate balance, compassion intertwined with authority, love tempered by experience. For years, they had underestimated me, dismissed me, ignored me. Now I had the opportunity to see them step into a better version of themselves, guided by the very conditions I had set, not dictated by ego, but by wisdom. And through it all, I reminded myself, the fire my grandmother ignited in me years ago had never burned out. It simply grew stronger, brighter, until it illuminated the path I now walked with unwavering confidence. Weeks later, I watched subtle changes unfold. My father no longer dismissed my ideas with a shrug. He asked questions, genuinely curious, offering support instead of judgment. My mother, slow at first, began pursuing her own passions, enrolling in classes she had always put off, her eyes bright with a newfound sense of purpose. Even his mother, the one who had arrived with a notary and pen, softened. She admitted, hesitantly, that she had misjudged me and perhaps herself. I smiled quietly, sipping my morning coffee, the aroma curling around me like a warm embrace. The leather-bound notebook my grandmother had given me still rested on my desk, its pages filled with years of ideas, strategies, victories, and quiet reflections. I touched it gently, a symbolic reminder of where it all began, the spark that had carried me through uncertainty, fear, and rejection. Reflecting on the journey, I realized it was never truly about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right, that I could endure, grow, and flourish without needing anyone's approval. That the quiet victories, the sleepless nights, and the moments of doubt were all stepping stones to a life of autonomy, clarity, and purpose. I had learned to balance strength with empathy, authority with compassion. I had created boundaries, demanded respect, and insisted on growth, not just for myself, but for those I still cared about. And in doing so, I had transformed not only my own life, but also the lives of those around me, gently guiding them toward the best versions of themselves. Looking out my office window, the city lights twinkling below like tiny stars, I felt a profound sense of peace. The fire my grandmother had ignited inside me years ago still burned, brighter than ever, illuminating not just my path, but the path for others willing to follow, to learn, and to grow. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment settle, and whispered to no one in particular, but to myself above all. I built this life, on my terms, and no one, not even them, will ever take it away from me. It was the perfect closure, strength wrapped in grace, independence woven with empathy, and a quiet, undeniable triumph that belonged wholly, completely, to me.